song. I don't know if you've heard it before. Before somebody tells me to do that, I'll turn that thing on. I don't know if you've heard that song before, but I really love that song. I actually asked Bob for 3 songs, but it looks like I'm only getting 2. He asked me how long the sermon was, and I told him about a half an hour. So, I don't know, what time do you guys wrap up the service today? Because it's almost noon. Yeah? Okay. But anyway, these songs have been such a blessing in my life, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about them as we move forward here. But it's good to be with you today. It's been a while. I forgot how hard it is to hide behind this pulpit up here. It's a little difficult, this crystal cathedral feel we have here. But thought I'd give you a little family update. Many of you have asked how we're all doing, and our family is growing. Maybe you know that already. But Amy and Jerome are still serving in the Salvation Army. Actually went to New York last week. We're up there serving, ministering to youth. And Amy's she stopped teaching. She's now the district Christian education coordinator for the Salvation Army. And Jerome is the district youth pastor, or youth coordinator. And they blessed us with 2 wonderful boys, Zeke and Julian. It's the greatest thing being a grandpa. I tell you, I love it. It wears me out. We had them for a week here recently, both of them. They're a year and a half and a year, or what, a year and a half and a year? No, that's not right, but they're young. And it was just a wonderful thing. Julian was teething, and so he can scream louder than Zeke ever could. And kept us up a lot, but we do it again in a heartbeat, just not tomorrow. Maybe a little bit more rest. But they're doing well, and love them to pieces. And there's some talk about maybe moving a little farther away. And Bob, I don't know how you deal with having a baby in Hungary or North Carolina or wherever it may be. That'd be hard for me to have them move farther away. So I hope it doesn't happen, but I want God's will more than that. So Sarah's doing great. She works for Huron County Family Court. She's their juvenile mentoring director. The court refers people, and she directs all that, and she's got such a great heart for that. She was a mentor there all the time that she's been there, having girls and taking care of them, and so it's a perfect fit for her. And she's faithful. Her and her boyfriend of 5 years, which they're talking about getting married, but he hasn't talked to me yet, so that still needs to happen. But he's a fine young man, and they attend the chapel up there. And Sarah plays the trombone in the praise band, and she's part of youth ministry and doing really well. And as you know, Michael got married about a year ago. He's got a wonderful wife named Caitlin who has such a heart for God. She's a blessing to our family. And they bought a house in Delaware, and then they sold it and moved to Urbana. She was called there to be their worship leader for their contemporary service, and she's fabulous. She's gifted at that, and so she's a blessing to them, I'm sure. And Michael, he prays about everything. I'll talk to him about something, he'll say, "Dad, I'm praying about that." And they minister to me now, which is a good thing. They have good hearts, and we're thankful for them. And Cheryl's faithfully serving at Trinity Baptist still as their treasurer and their administrative assistant. She's into everything that's going on there. She's central to a lot of things, so she's faithful in that. And I'm still at the juvenile probation office helping teenagers and younger kids with things that are going on in their lives, and that's a wonderful thing. So I just thought I'd give you a quick update on what's going on with us. It's been so long since I've seen some of you, and you've been asking. So one of the things you might be asking, though, is why did I give you a blank sheet in your bulletin? Do you have one in there? Did you get a blank? Kind of blank. Okay, there's no special reason, just to take notes on. No ulterior motive or anything on that. Just wanted you to be able to make some notes, which is you're going to do. Am I good on this mic? Because I feel like I'm not saying things exactly right. Is everything okay? All right. Let's begin with prayer, okay? God, we're thankful for this morning and thankful, Lord, the praise and worship time that we've had, just glorifying your name and spending time in your presence, Lord, seeking you and experiencing you here this morning. And I pray, God, as we continue to look unto you and your word, that you would speak to us. Lord, that you would show us the right path to take. And I'm grateful for the body here and what you're doing in their midst. And I pray with them, Lord, that you guide the right man to be here to shepherd this flock and to care for the flock and to continue to build up the flock. And we pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen. So let's start with, and this is going to be interactive. You know that with me, so be a little bit prepared to share and talk some as you feel like you can. But I'd like to start with thinking about our journey of getting to know God. You know, I've told you many times as we've shared together up here that the Christian life is a journey. It's not just a one-time event that happens and then, you know, it's all over. No, it's a journey. It's a process that we're getting to know God and learning about who He is. And I want to have you think here a minute and share some with me about how would you describe in one or two words what your journey has been like getting to know God. One or two words. I don't want long sentences really, but how would you characterize your getting to know God?
Bumpy.
Pardon?
Bumpy.
Bumpy? Yeah, I wrote that down too, kind of. Anybody else?
Whitewater rafting.
Whitewater rafting? Yes. Delightful, yes. Good words. Anybody else want to share what's your journey been like? One or two words. Eye-opening, yes. And I wrote down mysterious. There's a mysteriousness about it. God and all of His vastness and us and our finite little beings that we are and coming to understand who He is. Anybody else want to share how would you describe your journey of getting to know God? Surprises, yes. Oh, yes. I felt like it was a surprise when I heard about potentially moving farther away from my children. I wasn't ready for that. But yeah, there are lots of surprises. And we need those, don't we? Much as we don't want them sometimes. Anybody? Pardon? Ongoing, yes. Yes, that really speaks to it being about a journey. We have to keep going on. And it'll be that way for eternity as we get to know Him, because He is infinite and eternal. Anyone else want to share? Okay, just reminding you that the Christian life is a journey, not just a one-time event. It's a process of God developing us and maturing us and making us what He wants us to be, and it takes time. Dale kept asking me about a title for the sermon. And I didn't know what the title was, and I still don't know, but if I had to give it a title, I would say it's Contemplation. Okay, is that a word you're familiar with? Contemplation. Have you ever heard of contemplative prayer? Anybody heard of that? Contemplative prayer. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. When you think about the word contemplate, what comes to mind? Or what do you think's involved in contemplation? Anybody want to share a little bit about that? When you think about contemplate, what comes to mind?
Processing or thinking.
Yes, processing or thinking. Very good, Sid. Anyone else? Contemplation. Deep. Yes. I wrote that down too, both of those. Anyone else? Time. Absolutely. Time. Pardon? Analytical. Yes, that's a good word, Tina. Anyone else want to share what you think about when you think about contemplation? I wrote down musing, concentration, settling, absorbing, centering, taking time, slow time. I go over to this Amish place a lot. There's an orchard. I see this guy, and he says the Amish, it says, we're always on slow time. That's what he said. That's not our society, is it? No way. We'd say fast time. Slow, taking it easy, stillness, quietness, silence. That's all involved in contemplation. This is where God's been working in my life for many years, because we rush around, and I know I keep saying that to people when they give me an opportunity to talk, but it never changes. It's still the same. We're always rushing here and there and doing this and that, and our time gets so filled up. But my definition of contemplative prayer is this: taking the time to truly engage God, spending time in His presence, encountering Him and being encountered by Him. If I had to just use one word to characterize it, it would be connection. Isn't it wonderful when you connect with somebody? You meet somebody for the first time and you feel like, wow, I've known this person for a long time. There's a connection there. And that's what this contemplative prayer is all about, getting to know God and connecting with Him. So my wife's favorite verse is Psalm 46:10. What's that verse? Be still and know that I am God. We need to be still. One translation says, calm down. Calm down and know that I am God. Because we stress out so easily as human beings, don't we? We stress out and we get all anxious about things. And I was so anxious about coming up here and doing this. And God says, calm down. Calm down, Harry. It's going to be all right. Because God is in the middle of it all. So this contemplative prayer, though, can happen in two ways. It can happen in a lot of ways, but a couple that I'll talk about today is individually and also corporately or public times of contemplative prayer. As we think about the first one individually, on our own, we should be privately practicing contemplative prayer, being still and engaging and encountering God. This certainly involves time set aside. It takes time. I'll probably comment later. That's why I think Brethren National Youth Conference Momentum was so powerful, because we had so much time dedicated unto God. Lots of prayer, lots of time just centering upon God. And He moved in powerful ways because of that. But it involves time and having that time before God and listening to Him and letting Him minister to us in our innermost being. It involves learning to be aware of His presence and connecting with Him all through the day. One of my favorite authors on this contemplative prayer, his name is Richard Foster. And he's a Quaker, actually. Friends Fellowship comes from a Quaker background. But he has a lot on this topic of contemplative prayer. And I think I've shared a book with you in the past called Celebration of Discipline. He wrote that book, and it's a good book to read. Contemplative prayer involves some talk, but a lot of listening, a lot of solitude, a lot of silence, a lot of time before God, allowing Him to minister to us in our deep innermost being. And that's where change happens. Change doesn't happen otherwise unless God gets into us deeply and can minister to the needs of our heart. And we all know that there are hindrances, right, that keep us from this life of contemplative prayer or practicing time before God. Our sinfulness keeps us from that place. Satan and his host certainly opposes our time before God where He is ministering to us. But regardless of this opposition, we have to keep going. We have to keep going. We have to keep pursuing God and letting Him minister to us. We have to keep seeking Him. As Peter said, one of my favorite verses is John 6:68. You know what? Jesus asked him, are you going to leave too? And what does Peter say? He says, where are we going to go, Lord? Where would we go? You have the words of eternal life. You know, we have nowhere else to go. There are no other answers. I think we all know that as believers. Jesus is the only way. He is the only one who can really give life to us. And so there's nowhere else for us to go. And that's why we must keep seeking Him. And then secondly, as a body, and I enjoyed this morning the praise and worship time that we had together. I understood why Dale didn't want to let me have 3 songs to play on the video screen. He took one out already, so he even asked me if he could do that. I asked him for 3, and I think there's only 2. At least I've only heard 1 so far and 1 more to be played. So we must have miscommunicated. But that's okay. I'll share with you a little bit about that song. But on a corporate level, you know, as we think about it, as we assemble together here to worship God and to come together, that's prime opportunity for contemplative prayer, for connecting with God, which is what we're about. Joining together to encounter Him, to engage God. It's not just a meeting place. We all know that, but we need reminded of it. That we're here to connect with God and to help each other connect with God. That's why this is not just an individual life as a Christian. We need believers around us to help us connect with Him. Are you familiar with Psalm 95? It's long been known by the church as the call to worship. It's a public call to worship. It says, come, let us worship and bow down, and let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. You know, there's power in those verses of not just coming to a meeting, but coming before God as we meet together. There's a huge difference there. And does that sound like contemplative prayer when we're called to bow down and worship and to kneel before the Lord our Maker? Yes, it does. There's a deep contrition there, a deep engagement and sincere engagement with the living God. That's what we're here for. Not just meeting together, but a transformative encounter with the living God. And there's a big difference between the two. And I want to tell you, there's at least 18 inches, they say, between just meeting and encountering God. And you know what that 18 inches is? It's from your head to your heart. You can hear a lot of things in our head and in our brain, in our mind, but if it doesn't get here, the sooner it gets here, let me say, that's when the transformation takes place. When we get to that place where our heart is changed, where we know God inwardly and not just in our head. So as Christians, I believe we all long to encounter God in this way. We want to deeply know God. That's where the change takes place. To know Him in this way, to be totally at rest and at peace. How many peaceful people do you know? Few. Most are strung out in pursuing the things that we pursue in this world. But we want sin to be totally gone. We want to be filled up with all of who He is. And that's what contemplative prayer is all about. Think with me for a few minutes here about what is it that hinders this life of contemplative prayer. Let's talk together a little bit again. What hinders us from spending time before God in this way? Busyness, probably the top of the list. Just flying here and there. I can't get around that enough. And anymore, people are flying around with the phone in front of them, you know. I can't get over just walking down the street and how people are just looking at their phone as they're walking down the street. I'll do that once in a while, here and there where you got to look at something on there, but it just shocks me at times to see. I went through a training, self-defense training, and just being aware of things, and phones are a huge distraction for that reason. So what else can you think of? What else hinders us from this life of contemplative prayer? What's that, Doug? Priorities. Yeah, I'm going to say that here in a few minutes. Priorities, period. It is. We need to have our eyes open to see what's really important. Anything else you think of?
Rebellion.
Pardon? Rebellion, yes. Sinfulness that we have. Yes. What were you saying, Tina? Sin. Wouldn't it be wonderful if sin was totally gone? It's coming. I want to promise you it's coming someday. It's going to be gone. I hate it that I fail so much. You know, God keeps humbling me. I fail and he just graciously brings me back. That's the song that we left out. It's called Met by Love by this same group, United Pursuit. It says, I run into my Father's arms. It's part of that song. Who can you run to like that knows us so deeply, knows all of our infidelities, all of our vulnerabilities, all of our sin, and still wants us? That is God. What else can you think of? What else keeps us from this contemplative prayer life? Pardon? Yeah, no. I sleep with a fan on. Too quiet otherwise. But actually it distracts me from all the other noise around. I just tune in on that fan. But you're right. And the big part of the contemplative prayer life is solitude and silence. Just listening. Just listening. Some listening. We don't do so well at that, do we? Naturally. What else? Overcommitting, yes. That is so true. We fill up our calendars so fast with stuff. I've learned to say no. Isn't that a wonderful thing, to learn to say no? It is, because I feel compelled. I'm a people pleaser. If you want me to do something for you, I want to do it. When Dale calls me up to preach, I want to do it. But then I don't want to do it. You know what I feel like? But it is. You need to learn to say no. What else? What else keeps us from this place? How about worry and anxiety? How about it, huh? We're anxious people. I'd love to be able to take Zoloft all the time. You know, maybe you don't know what that is, but it's an antidepressant, anti-anxiety drug that a lot of people take, which I understand. But I can't get myself to go to the doctor and ask him for it. I figure I need to trust God. That's me. That's what I have to do. What else? What else keeps us from this life of contemplative prayer?
Lack of trust.
Lack of trust. That is so right. I almost bought, Cheryl and I made these little wooden, we're into doing things together, but we made this little thing on a little piece of wood and it says trust. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And we gave it to all of our graduates this year, along with some money. But yeah, trust. Just a reminder to trust. So true. How about other people? A lot of times other people keep us from this place. Like I said, I'm a people pleaser, so it's hard for me I get distracted that way. So many distractions though, our cell phones, our computers, our iPads, our iPods, all of it can be entered in there, but a lot of things keep us from that place. But Doug, as you said, the priorities, we need our eyes opened up. We need to really see what's going on. We need to really see what's real. We need to really see what's important, and we need to do something about it. We need to take the time to do it. It takes time. It takes time to be changed. And Dale kept asking me for a sermon outline. I guess that's a priority for the preachers you have coming here. I'm just kidding, Dale. I like to razz him a little bit. Nobody else probably does, so he needs it. But if I had to give you an outline on contemplative prayer, take time to contemplate on God, who God is, and then take time to contemplate on who you are, who I am. Take time to contemplate on that. Maybe you already do this, but I would encourage you to start keeping a journal of who God is. Write things down in there about who you know He is. And keep that, and keep adding to it. And look back on it. It's amazing what you'll find there of how you've learned to know God and wrote it down. Keep a record of it of sorts. So let's take a minute here and talk about who is God? Who do we know him to be? Let's again go with like 1 or 2 word descriptors. Who is God? He is creator, yes. He created everything that we know and see. What else? How else would you describe? Pardon?
A patient father.
A patient father, yes.
Ancient of days.
What was that?
Ancient of days.
Ancient of days, yes. Anybody else?
Redeemer.
Redeemer, yes. He redeemed us, didn't he? All of us. Anyone else? If you haven't started your journal already, start writing these down, because you're going to add to it as you go on in this journey. You'll keep adding to who you're learning God to be. But he's holy. He's faithful. He's good. He's great. He's forgiving. He is love. That song made reference to perfect love. The more we can enter into God's perfect love, the greater our solid foundation will be. The greater our whole being will be as we understand his perfect love. He's pure, he's powerful, he's a person, he's understanding. You know, I almost talked to you about Psalm 23 coming in here, just praying on what to talk to you about. And just reminding you that the Lord is our shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is the one that's watching over this flock. He may have an under-shepherd coming, but he's the one that's shepherding this flock. And he will always shepherd the flock. And what does it tell us about that shepherd? He's going to guide us into quiet places, right? Green pastures and still waters. That's how God works. He knows what we need. He knows all of our needs. He's sovereign. He's gracious. He's trustworthy. How many people do you know that you trust? You'd trust with anything? Not very many, right? And especially, you know, people say to me, Harry, you're a good man. Well, you haven't talked to my wife lately. You know, she knows me. She knows who I am. And she knows my failures and my limitations, and she keeps on loving me. And I trust her. You know, but God knows us even more. You know, deep down inside, things that probably you've never shared with anyone. Regrets you have. Shame you have. Trespasses that you and I have. And God still loves us and wants us to be with him. He wants to be around us. He wants to put his arm around us and just hold us tight. You know, I've learned that I used to always pretty much, if I failed, I felt like God was judging me and condemning me. It was really me doing that. He's not. He wants me back. He wants me there. And he wants me to run into his loving arms. I'm learning to do that a little quicker than before. He's a patient father that wants us with him. And that's a wonderful thing to know. Now take a few minutes and think about who we are, who I am. Who are you? You're going to think I'm kind of nuts, but some years ago I started keeping a file on myself. I started writing down some things that, just learning about who I am. Because, you know, we're all unique. Just think if there was all Harrys sitting out there. I wouldn't even have to talk, because they'd all know exactly what it's all about, right? But we're not. We're all unique. All of you are unique people. Nobody else like you anywhere else. I know there's that lie out there that says there's another one of you somewhere in this world. It's not true. God tells us that. We're all unique. But start keeping a file on yourself. I even started a little thing on my phone of things that I like. Yeah, Doug. You won't see me walking down the street looking at it, though. Yeah, I got a little notepad here that I wrote. Now, you know, I talk to God a little bit on my phone in ways, but he says, I give you all my anxiety. And then I wrote things that I appreciate. I appreciate seeing someone smile. That's huge, you know, because so many people are frowning. Seeing someone just legitimately and sincerely smiling, That's a wonderful thing. I like a cup of coffee in the morning. I wrote that down. Actually, I put down a cup of Folgers, but I switched to Costco coffee. But Folgers in your cup, the best part of waking up, right? That's their thing. I like breathing fresh air. I like time alone. I appreciate God's goodness. I like waking up early in the morning. I love getting up early. I'm always, well, almost 99% of the time, I'm the first one up in our house, always. And my kids, they get up early too. I like that about them. Their spouses sleep in, but my kids always get up pretty early. They got that from their dad and mom some. But I like the first heavy snowfall of winter. I love all the changes that we have. I couldn't just live in one climate, I don't think, because I anticipate the changes, although winter time's getting less and less appreciated. But I like driving through the country on a sunny day, and I love going home. After I go somewhere, I love just to be able to go home. What if you didn't have a home to go to? How hard that would be. I love just to go home. And our house is big enough for Cheryl and I. She can be on one end and I can be on the other end if we want to be, but we're always together, it seems like, wherever we're at. But I encourage you, start a file on yourself. Think about it. Who are we as God's child? What would you say? Who are we? Think about this a little bit. Who are we? How would you you guys all look blank. What is it?
Not God.
We're not God. That's right. That's a good point.
We are His beloved.
We are His beloved. Yes. And Dale said, yes, we are. And that's as you're keeping that journal, write these things in there and refer back to it. We need reminded about things, don't we? We forget so easily. But we're protected by God. We're forgiven. Isn't that a wonderful thing to know that you're forgiven? Past, present, future. As His child, you are forgiven. You are forgiven. That's so wonderful to know. All of our failures, mistakes, trespasses, everything's forgiven. As I told you before, you're unique. And one thing I like about who I am is I'm going to heaven. Write that in your journal. You're going to heaven. You're not staying here. This is all going to come to an end someday. This part of it, this part of this life, it's going to come to an end. But as I told you earlier in the sermon, that Christian life is a journey. It's not just a one-time event. And I would encourage you as you're working on that journal to outline it this way, Dale. Where we came from, where we're at, and where we're going. If you contemplate on those three things, then you'll learn a lot about what God's done in your life. And I think as we contemplatively pray about these phases of our lives, that we'll see what amazing things God has done in our lives all these years, and how faithful He will be to see us through this journey and into the next. And as we close our time together today, I hope that you've been encouraged. And I'm thankful that we had time to consider these things together. And I pray that all of us grow deeper in this life of contemplative prayer. And we're going to listen to a song as we close here. And then I'll talk to you for just a few more minutes.